Do you know examples like even in Europe where you could you actually observed a drastic improvement in agricultural practices and in terms of using the pesticides by those trends of changing the policies, you know?
Many practices. Europe overall for the last, I don't know, maybe 2 decades has been moving in a direction that's reducing the reliance on external inputs and in particular pesticides. They currently have a strategy called Farm to Fork, which is aiming to reduce pesticide use even further. There are other international policies that are aiming to remove the most harmful chemicals from use altogether, highly hazardous pesticides. This comes from the Strategic Approach for International Chemicals Management. It comes from FAO, from UNEP, from WHO. All of them are moving in that direction. Also the Convention on Biological Diversity, because they all see that the current continued dependence, heavy dependence on agricultural inputs like pesticides is unsustainable. It is damaging biodiversity, it's damaging agricultural productivity, and it needs to be rationalized. So significant reduction of chemical use is part of the overall strategy. And there are many examples. One example that comes to mind is in southern Spain, where they produce a lot of the things like tomatoes, cucumbers, peppers for the European market. It used to be very, very chemical intensive until they realized that it was entirely unsustainable. And there were food scares again in Northern Europe. And they basically said, we're not buying this stuff anymore. And they changed very quickly. And now it's almost all organic. And they're still producing and they're still selling and everybody's thriving. But the food is safer.
But there is another argument, especially in countries like Uzbekistan, to these success stories of Europe, for example, that, it's easy for Europe to say so because it's a developed country and agriculture doesn't play such a role, and they're not really major exporters of agricultural goods. They don't depend on agriculture like developing countries, etc. So, and why we are in a different sort of position, and we have to do that.
Totally in other conditions.
Yeah.
It's not true. It may be true that the national economy of the Netherlands or of Spain doesn't depend primarily on agriculture. But agriculture is still a very important component of their agricultural output. And even if it isn't important nationally, it is extremely important in particular regions and for those farmers whose livelihoods depend on it. So it is important. And it is taken seriously, and it is part of national and regional policy. So it's not a matter of, it's easy because they're Europe. It's actually probably easier here, because here you have more people who are involved in agriculture and in farming, and who can help to bring about those changes and to support them when they need to. And because it's more important for the national economy, there will be more energy and more effort put into getting it right. Which I think is important.
And, also another thing that comes up, another matter that comes up is because this area is very science intensive, sort of very scientifically involved, right? And it's not a secret. I mean, developing countries, and Uzbekistan in particular, of course, we don't particularly have a strong scientific capacity, for example, even in the process of registration of pesticides, or doing the testing, things like that. We have to be realistic. We are not there. And plus our economy was focused on completely different things over the past decades, so we were just, in that sense, when you have such a low science capacity, what would be the best approach, because obviously when we hear arguments like, we have to train our own, specialists and it will take time, or the government, of course, usually doesn't admit we have a low capacity. They would say, we have all the specialists, etc. But then we realize it's not so. There are international standards and there are international institutions who and the access to certain scientific information which is available, right? So what would be the best approach for such countries, not to wait until they grow another generation of scientists?
Okay, so I'll come back to the issue of techno or scientific capacity in Uzbekistan, but to answer your question directly, when I was in FAO, we recognized the fact that that in pesticide regulation, for example, capacity in lower income countries is limited, but they still have to make the same decision. So, for example, we did a survey and we found that in most lower income and middle income countries, there are between 3 and 10 people involved in pesticide registration, the entire process. That's average size of a pesticide registration unit. In industrialized countries, OECD countries, there are between 100 and 2,000 people involved in pesticide registration, doing exactly the same job. So of course it's impossible for a lower income country to do an effective job in this situation. So what we did was we developed a toolkit. It's called the Pesticide Registration Toolkit. It's open to anybody that wants to access it, to the public and to anybody else. And we provide training. And in fact, last week we trained people in Uzbekistan to use the Pesticide Registration Toolkit. People from the Ministry, from the Agency for Plant Protection and Quarantine, and also people from Ministry of Environment and Ministry of Health. So now there is capacity here in this country to use that toolkit, and it gives them access to decisions that have been made in other countries from all over the world, industrialized and non-industrialized countries. They can compare the information that they're being given with information that's delivered elsewhere. They can compare the registrations made elsewhere and decide if they want to go in the same direction or if they want to do things differently. So now they have tools to be able to do that. But coming back to what you were saying before, Uzbekistan doesn't have the scientific capacity. You actually have some great scientists here, and you have very experienced farmers. You have knowledge. It just needs to be applied in the correct way to be able to make the right decisions and move in the right direction. I mentioned earlier, for example, that you have really good work happening here on biological controls. It's fantastic. The farmers need to be told what's available and taught how to use it, because it's different to using chemicals. And you can move in the direction of great sustainability in pest management. It will be a really good thing. Uzbekistan could be a world leader in this field. And then you could be selling your agricultural produce as, look, we don't use chemicals. We use biological control. We use nature because we understand it. That's a way forward.
Maybe one of the ways to solve or simplify this problem, maybe, it's only my opinion, maybe I'm wrong, that, for example, if we see the situation in pharma industry, because it's one of the main my fields, that's why I always think about and may compare with it, that we have now a situation when we can recognize, for example, the documentation about medicines from about 20 most developed countries. So it's not necessary to make special research for them. We just adopted them and recognize, and we make a license for them. Yes, marketing authorization. So of course we can implement this instrument here, but here I think one of the problems, it's not only one, but one of the main, because most of the fertilizers, most of pesticides are not adopted in Europe because due to their safety. But and European or American for chemicals are not using them due to their price, and other ways. We use cheap and cheap raw materials from the market where we can get it. I think one of the most problem is here also.
Yeah. And I think also that we're still not really taking benefit of using the sources of international expertise and knowledge, and that is available already. I mean, we are members to Codex Alimentarius, for example, or members to a number of different FAO, different other organizations, and where they have scientific committees where the member states could participate, and there are certain dossiers that are available right through this toolkit, etc. It's just we're not using it. And I think one of the wrong sort of perceptions that we have, not only in Uzbekistan and former Soviet Union countries, I mean, you cannot, because we often talk about we have to harmonize with international standards, we need to adopt international standards, but then some officials, they completely misinterpret it and they say, we have to adopt international standards to our standards. So that's a good opposite. And then that's a problem, you can't adopt international standards to local standards. It's very wrong, I think. I think they're confusing when we're talking about some special conditions of climate or whatever, in certain countries, but it's very different. But the basis of international standards, the whole idea is that it's already scientifically proven, it's already been coordinated and communicated and consulted with the most of the scientific community of the world. And where we also have a chance to participate. The doors are open, you know.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. There are international standards out there. You do not need to reinvent the wheel, and you can tap into those. Again, the training that we provided last week has given access to some of those things. This week, in my discussions with APPQ, the Plant Protection and Quarantine Agency, I again said to them, gave them examples of how they can get training in certain areas internationally and bring that training back and build the capacity here. So, as you said that there isn't the scientific knowledge here. I was saying, well, there is scientific knowledge. It needs to be applied. But maybe part of the problem is that you haven't got enough of the people with that knowledge. And really it's about capacity. It's about how many people are doing this work. In the registration department here for pesticides, there are 7 people. 7 people is not enough. They've got a lot of work to do. I've seen evidence of people who are working at 11 o'clock at night, putting data into their electronic system. They shouldn't have to do that. They should be doing a reasonable amount of work.
But also part of the reasons is because a lot that is involved with the current routine work is just completely unnecessary sometimes.
Possibly. Yeah.
So maybe that's what they should start with,
But also, you were mentioning earlier about the fact that that chemicals are being used that are not approved in other places and so on, and they're being used too much, and there are all these mechanisms to keep delivering these chemicals. That's what going back to the issue we were talking about subsidies. This is where you can use subsidies to redirect towards good practices. You can use subsidies to encourage the practices that move away from using chemicals excessively or towards using things like biocontrols. In pricing mechanisms, you said that the cheaper chemicals are the ones that are not approved in Europe. They're the ones that the farmers are using, and the better chemicals that come from the US and Europe are very expensive, and the farmers don't want to use them. That's probably true, but again, you can use your government incentives, your subsidy systems to tax lower quality or pesticides from certain sources more highly, and those from better sources and those things that you want the farmers to use, tax them at lower levels, or subsidize those so the farmers can afford them, and you moving towards better and more sustainable approaches.
Yes. Of course, you see a lot of different difficulties during your work here, and can you show how can we help you, maybe to your work, to your colleagues? I mean about the legal society, about expert society. What can we do to make all process much more easily?
I think this radio program is part of that story. It's about raising awareness. It's about getting interest amongst people who, I don't know who listens to this, but I'm hoping that some people who can make a difference will listen and will make some noise about this. I'm having meetings with people who are influential and hopefully can guide decisions in government in the right direction. I'm working with technical people who are great. They understand what the issues are. They understand what they want to do, but they need to be given the support of their management, and they need to be given the resources to be able to do their work properly. So, there are many steps in the process. Like I said earlier, there isn't one single solution to all of this. There are many elements to it. I'm happy to continue working as long as there is a receptiveness to it. I'm not interested in wasting my time, talking at brick walls that are not going to change anything. So if I feel that what I'm doing is going to help bring about change for better, great. I'm willing to carry on helping. I'm willing to bring other experts and bring other guidance that will do that. But people like me, if we come here, we spend 2, 3, 4 weeks, giving all our advice to somebody, and it's completely ignored, we'll stop coming. There's no point. There's no interest. I love coming to Uzbekistan. The people are wonderful, and the food is great, and the weather is nice, but I'm not going to waste my time coming here if I'm going to be ignored.
So basically, we could say that they should start with policies. So what would be your recommendations in terms of what should be the best policy from the, that would be sustainable, that would be really both, economically and at the same time socially, that the policy changes that the Uzbekistan should make?
Well, I'll let you into a little trade secret here. When I write documents, policy documents, guidance documents, regulations for Uzbekistan, I'm not writing them from scratch. I'm taking material that's already been developed. They don't have to reinvent any wheels here. All of this work has been done already. There is policy guidance on every topic you can imagine, which includes pesticides, which includes climate change, which includes sustainability. All of these things are available. I will pull those things off the shelf and I'll make them available to people here that they can use them. And if they want to change, do a word search and change whichever country to Uzbekistan, we can do that as well, no problem. So, there's plenty of material out there that guides policies. And there is so much work going on right now about sustainability because it's crucial. Everybody realizes it. There is a lot of talk globally about the fact that the global population is going to grow to 11 billion by 2050. And in order to do that, FAO says that you need to produce maybe 50% more food. Actually, I disagree. Because there is plenty of food in the planet. It's just in the wrong place. And the people that need it most don't have access to it because it's unaffordable or it's just not there in the marketplace.
Or wasted or lost.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So we need to deal with food waste. We need to deal with accessibility to food. We need to deal with affordability and distribution. Those are the key issues that need to be dealt with. So we don't necessarily need to significantly intensify production, but we do need to keep up production, certainly. And in order to do that, you need to protect the environment that you're using to produce agriculture, which means that you need to stop throwing toxic chemicals at it. That's a first thing that you need to do. And you need to be looking at other things like which varieties are you growing? Yeah. Are you rotating your crops or are you monocropping over and over again on the same land? How are you looking after your soil? How are you protecting your biodiversity and your ecosystem in which you're producing agriculture? All of these contribute to sustainability. All of these things are part of it. Of course, water management is an important part of it as well.
Land use.
Yeah.
So I would say basically that the government should move away from monoculture policy as a very important step, because otherwise they would just keep on throwing chemicals, right, and wasting water.
If that's current policy, then definitely they should move away from it.
Yeah, that's the current policy. And then, of course, introducing market mechanisms so that the land would become an asset and the farmers really own the land and feel incentives and responsibilities, right, for using it right.
Definitely. Why would a farmer invest in their land and try and make it sustainable if they don't know if they're going to be able to use it in a few years' time, if they haven't got secure tenure? That's fundamental. They must have that. Otherwise, there's no point. There's no way forward.
Yeah. And then the government institutions, of course, should not be entangled into production, right? They should be regulators, not operators of the market. That's one of the problems of Uzbekistan, where the government is still feels like it's responsible for production.
Due to the absence of private property to land, and farmer don't consider it as his own assets. That's why I think public advocacy don't work correctly. It's not enough. But should be the real reasons why it should be developed. I think this. Yes. Thank you. Thank you very much. It's very interesting. You opened my eyes to many questions.
Yeah. No, these are fascinating discussions. It's really good.
Yes. Thank you very much. Thank you.
So should we keep eating our fruits and vegetables?
Definitely. They're fantastic. I come from the UK. Here, a tomato tastes like a tomato. Yeah. I don't know what other chemicals are in it, but it tastes great. And your apricots are fantastic. So keep eating them.
It's very it's really a blessing that this is one of the comparative advantages for the fruits and vegetables. Actually, the climate, that during the day we have hot temperature and at night it's pretty cool, so it gives this kind of sweetness. So I'm just afraid that because of this reduction in biodiversity and this whole chemical treatment, we're losing our comparative advantages, and that's probably the
because we lose our local types of plants.
Yeah, traditional varieties.
traditional.
You know, that farmers' traditional varieties. You know, they've been really reduced because of the monoculture. So.
Right. So there's a huge regeneration of these traditional varieties in other countries. In Europe, for example, you know, they're bringing back the old varieties. First of all, because they taste better, and secondly, because they help with this diversity that we were talking about, which improves resilience to any changes, including climate change, but anything else that happens.
Thank you. I think we will. We definitely must make the meeting once again, because I think we not opened all questions we have, because it's very deep topic. It's very difficult topic, but I think the first step is done, and we all hope that your support will continue. We need your support. We need support of your colleagues, of your institution. Thank you very much again.
Thank you very
Thank
much.
you.
Thank
It's
you.
been really interesting.
you.
I think for you also.
Thank you.